Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Halpin, and welcome to our latest webinar brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy's ESPC campaign through the Energy Services Coalition. Today, we're going to be talking about how to structure a state ESPC program to maximize agency participation. We've got a few people already on. We're going to wait another minute or two until we really kind of get started. But we hope you get a lot out of this presentation. All right, let's see. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's already a few minutes after. Okay, next slide. All right, so today we're going to be focusing on state programs, as I mentioned, and how a state can either structure an ESPC program from scratch or refine one to really drive more agency participation and develop and execute successful projects. And even at times like now, right, where funding has been on the downward trend right now and resources fluctuate, energy costs are increasing. There's a lot of things going on in the marketplace right now. We want to talk about how states can really use this tool, both for their agencies and for their energy offices. And we're going to have some guest speakers we'll talk about in a second who have got a lot of experience with these issues. Next slide. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. And at the end, we're going to be taking questions and answers that will not be included in the recording, right? We're just going to have the webinar itself included in the recording that will be sent to all registered folks. Next slide. All right. So this is myself. Been in the business 40 years. Won't go into a lot of detail, but I've worked on the ESCO side, owners rep side, global energy manager side for federal, state, and local governments for many, many years. And then Sam Kramer, with senior program director with NASIO. Colin Silber with the New Mexico EMNRD, who is running their program, and Harold Trujillo, who's been trying to retire for years from this position at New Mexico Energy Office and still keeps coming back. But a wonderful, wonderful resource to this whole industry. Next slide. And again, you can go through those detailed bios when you have some more time. Thank you. All right, so ESC, most of you are on this have probably heard of us before, Energy Services Coalition. We're a national nonprofit composed of experts both from industry, energy services companies and owners reps, vendors and the like, as well as state energy officials, energy office heads, inside ESPC champions at agencies and engineering firms and so on. The heart and soul of this organization are the local chapters who really do a great job of working together. You take off your ESCO hat or OR hat and work together with your state agencies to get the word out about ESPC and promote it as the best tool in the toolbox for pretty much any public agency out there to get stuff done in their buildings. Next slide. So here at the ESPC campaign, it's just hit its 2-year anniversary last month in January. We've really gotten some momentum going here in the past 6 months or so. We're looking for more people to get involved, both as campaign leaders, which are really sort of the state energy office folks or similar organizations, ESPC champions. So that's somebody who's like the head of facilities, CFO, whatever, that's inside an agency that's actually using energy and really wants to do one of these projects or is doing projects like this. And then supporters, that's all the sort of the private industry folks from energy services companies, lighting vendors, controls vendors, owners reps, finance folks, attorneys, pretty much anyone else that's not on the MUSH market side. We really like to have you join and get the additional benefits that are associated with membership that you don't get just from watching these webinars here and there. So when you have a chance, just click on that expression of interest link. Next slide. So about ESPC. So ESPC has been around since the late 70s, early 80s. It was started in a few states. The U.S. Department of Energy got involved after they tried to do one on their own. It took 6 years to award, and they figured there must be a better way to do this. So they started the Super ESPC program, and that's resulted in billions and millions of dollars being invested in the federal marketplace. And it's spread throughout the states in that time, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It really got going. Um, and I, you see Department of Energy's definition there. I like to say it's a financial mechanism used to pay for today's facilities upgrades with tomorrow's energy savings without tapping into your organization's capital budget. And as we know, right after the big, economic meltdown, the pandemic, and now with the sort of the pullback of federal funds, capital budgets are extremely precious, right? And to not have to go and ask for capital money or try to have to go do a referendum or some sort of a vote to the public to get tax dollars, it really sets ESPC apart from most other public procurement. And for me, done properly, using these national best practices we teach through these webinars, it has the performance of a hedge fund with the risk of a T-bill. That's a tagline from the EPA Energy Star from many years ago. But I see it working that way because efficiency works virtually every single time, works well, and you don't have to sign new long-term contracts with suppliers for it. You're working with folks that you know. And it's really just design build contracting with a focus on guaranteed savings and no change orders. Next slide. So most of you have seen this Department of Energy and NREL, who started this in Colorado many, many years ago. It's sort of a graphic that shows currently you've got your existing energy and operations budgets. And when you work with your ESCO to develop a project, it reduces your energy use, right? And thus your costs. And you take that money, and through the ESPC legislation you have in your state, it allows you to basically fence or protect that money and move it over to a line item in your budget for paying off the financing that you get for this, right? And then usually a net positive cash flow every year. In most states, that is written into the statute, right? So you can't use excess savings in 1 year to pay back savings in another year. Like I like to say, there's no rollover minutes in ESPC. And then once you get through your 10 to 15, 20-year term, all those savings accrue to the state or state agency that has implemented the project. It's sort of like getting a mortgage on your house, if you will. Next slide. So some of the origins of this, right? Like I mentioned before, it started in the 70s and 80s, really as a response to the energy crises of the 70s, where, state and local governments were seeing their energy bills quadruple. I mean, not like 10%, 30% we've seen here. I mean, literally go up by orders of magnitude. And public infrastructure, the heyday of building public infrastructure was in the 50s to the early 70s. And they really needed to do something. And ESPC turned out to be a great solution, especially to overcome barriers in most state agencies. And those of you that work for states now or have in the past, it's typically a very long procurement cycle, right? You could identify a project and it may take 5 to 7 years to get the money to do it. Your budgets are very, very strict, right? If you don't use all that money in that one fiscal year, it may not roll over into the next fiscal year. And ESPC allows you to overcome that. And in most places, you have a very conservative fiscal structure. I spent many years in New England before I moved out here to the West. And we had some, town charters that were put in place in the late 1600s, right? So it was very hard to overcome that sort of mentality. And risk aversion, as there well should be, right? You're holding taxpayer money in your hands to help, do the most fiscally prudent things you can with that money at state buildings. And you want to make sure it's done properly. But performance contracting addresses a lot of this, right? By shifting most of the risk over to the ESCO versus being on the state. So many of the benefits of using this, right, is budget-friendly modernization. Like I said, you get to do a cash flow neutral project by using third-party money, right? It creates a lot of jobs. I've seen jobs created in the thousands of projects like this, especially at times when it's really, really needed. Like right after the economic meltdown of 2010 to 15, that saved a lot of jobs out here in Nevada, where I live now, but in many states around the country at the time. It gives you guaranteed results that you just do not get with any sort of design bid build project in the normal public procurement sphere. And with resilience, right? It's a big topic today. It gets more and more important every year. And it's the best tool for most state agencies to handle it, right? With the increasing floods, fires, hurricanes, crazy winter storms, um, the normal, 5 to 10 year procurement cycle, it's just not going to work, right? And ESPC can help you address these things within 2 years typically. It also helps operational efficiency, really freeing up funds for core services, and your educational mission, healing the sick, whatever it might be, and really improves the indoor environment for folks, right? As we just did this a few weeks ago for K through 12 schools, and we had the director of USGBC saying the most important thing is keeping the kids in their seats learning, right? Mission first, always. Energy savings is nice, but mission is the most important thing. Next slide. So ESPC, as I mentioned, has been around a long time. It's a resilient model, not only helping with resilience, but it's really been able to stay the course regardless of what funding levels come, because it's really a public-private partnership, right? Private money, private contractors doing the public good. It's gone through all kinds of political transitions and economic downturns. One of the things I like about it, I call it a purple issue because it's privately financed, doesn't require taxpayer dollars, right? If you happen to have some money that you've funded or you've set aside already to do, like I've seen this, a chiller replacement project, it's going to cost you $500,000 and you only have $150,000 to do it. ESPC can help you take that money and use it as a down payment, if you will. And it's been adopted in every state out there, right? From Alaska and Florida to Maine and California. It really supports local economies, right? This tends to be run by large national corporations. There's some local companies that do it, but they hire almost exclusively local contractors and buy a lot of the materials locally. So I've seen huge improvements because of this. You get the transparency of rigorous measurement verification. We did a whole nother webinar on that, and reduces the operating costs for the public sector organizations. As you all know, the budgets are overburdened, and that's not going away anytime soon. So over 30 billion, and that's a very conservative estimate, has been done with this in states all across the country. Next slide. Here's a graphic on how this really works. We won't go into this in a lot of detail, but it's basically set up so that you, the owner, the state agency, in this case, you can hire an owner's rep. A lot of states have owner's reps on pre-qualified contracts. If not, that's a really good practice to do. They can provide you with expert guidance for quality assurance and provide you a lot of review of technical, financial, and contractual documents, right? And again, I used to do this for a living for 20 years when I worked for an ESCO. Before that, I wish there had been more people doing this to help states get these deals across the line, right? You have the ESCO, which is your primary partner in these deals, and they really are your partner. They provide you with the guaranteed energy savings, and then you pay them over time, right? Actually, you pay them during the construction period out of the financier's money, right? And the financier is the one that you get into place right around the time you're finalizing the investment grade audit. So when the deal closes, much like when you get a mortgage on your house, at closing, the attorney hands out the checks to all the different parties, right? That's what happens when you close a performance contract. The financier sets the money aside to pay the ESCO into a custodial account. The ESCO takes draws against that money over the 1 or 2 year construction period. When that's completed and you accept the project, 60 days later is when the finance payments start. So unlike most public construction projects, you're not paying out of your pocket during the construction. You don't pay a penny till you accept these projects, which is, again, it's another real differentiator between ESPC and design bid build. Next slide. Next slide. So state agencies, right, as we all know, right, a lot of these agencies are absolutely mission critical, right? You've got hospitals, prisons, universities, courts, public safety. It varies from state to state, but they serve virtually all the residents of every state around the country. And in some cases, there's millions of square feet, right? Like California, Texas, Florida, New York have 50 to 100, 150 million square feet under management at their state uh, agencies. So it's a lot of work with never quite enough money to do it. And most of these facilities date back from the 70s and 90s, some even much older. And in many cases, they can't shut down, right? The sort of the main state hospital in any state never ever shuts down. It's 24/7 operation, right? Same with prisons, obviously. So it's hard to keep up with a lot of the stuff that goes on in these buildings because they're always operating. And deferred maintenance is massive, right? There's no big secret here. There's over 100 billion in higher ed alone. Correction facilities, 16 to 32 billion, and these are all probably very conservative estimates. Um, and the money just isn't available to be able to fund these buildings the way they need to be. And that chronic underfunding really affects the operations of these facilities. And on top of that, we saw relatively static energy costs for a while, and now they've really increased, right? Ever since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we saw that 30% bump. Natural gas costs continue to increase, although they fluctuate, and electricity costs are going to just go up for the future because the national electric grid is old and it's stressed and it requires a lot of investment. So utilities are just rate basing a lot of these increases we're seeing. So ESPC can really help you as a hedge against these things going forward. Next slide. So but we're not going to go into a lot of the details here. There's some stuff that you can take a look at afterwards. But for each of these 5 different facility types, everything from inconsistent temperature and humidity requirements, and most people don't realize this in hospitals, they control the pressure between different wards to stop the spread of disease, right? If that fails, right, you've got a really big problem in a hospital, right? The same thing with like plumbing in correctional facilities, right? Inmates trying to flush to flood the buildings, right? So there's all kinds of things that go on like this that ESPC can address that are challenges that are very difficult for state agencies to handle otherwise. Next slide. So what ESPC really does is it takes wasted energy dollars, right? Sort of efficiency equity, I've heard somebody refer to it as, and convert it into modern infrastructure. So you're taking money that you're handing to utilities every day, and you're reclaiming it and reinvesting it in your own facilities. Which, if you think about that, most times that is a very difficult thing to do outside of ESPC without compromising your agency missions, right? Like I said, mission comes first, always. I've talked about most of this already, but it really allows you to attack things like deferred maintenance at scale, right? Instead of doing patchwork fixes like in the summers for schools, right? The school boards and higher ed race to spend 2 months getting as many things fixed as possible. And the fact that it's budget neutral makes it much easier to sell to the financial people in most of these organizations. Next slide. So how can state energy offices support these agencies, right? So most agencies are, of course, under the executive branch of state government, as are the state energy offices. And state energy offices have sort of a dotted line relationship to most of the agencies that they serve. Sometimes they're buried inside of one of these agencies, but most of the times they're inside either a separate energy office or it's under Department of Commerce, Department of General Services, something like that. But they'll typically work with corrections, hospitals, health and human services, universities, colleges, the DOTs, and departments of justice, which tend to be the ones that have all the courthouses and all the laboratories, which are critical, right, to solving crimes and so on. So there's a lot of things that can get done. I'm going to hand it over to Sam here in a minute from the NASIO, right? They spend a lot of time doing great work helping these state energy offices and supporting them over time. Next slide. All right, Sam, you can take it from here.
Sure. So thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate it. Quick introduction here. Sam Kramer with NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officials. I'm their senior program director, leading up our finance and energy planning work. It's nice to see everybody on the call today. So, like Chris said, the state energy offices are typically embedded within the state government, oftentimes within another agency, but oftentimes as a standalone agency as well. When we're seeing a trend towards more of the energy offices be standalone agencies, which is great to see. Uh, given given the energy office's purview over, all things energy policy and programs at the state level, ESPC is a natural fit for an energy office to play a lead role in providing technical assistance and support. While the energy offices are not the only agencies that do that, depending on the state. For example, Washington State, the Department of Enterprise Services provides technical assistance, and Maryland is the Department of General Services, so on and so forth. Most state energy offices are well positioned to provide comprehensive technical assistance and support for state agencies looking to make improvements using ESPC. And so what we've seen kind of nationally is the state energy offices typically use state energy program dollars, a fee structure, or a combination of both to provide support for technical staff who have experience in acting, in a sort of a pseudo owner's representative capacity and able to hold the hands of state agencies that are unfamiliar with ESPC and guide them through the process. And the technical assistance that these offices provide can usually be information and education to different state energy offices or different state agencies that are interested in learning more about ESPC, but not quite ready to take the plunge. Virginia does a number of summit meetings, and so I believe New Mexico can talk about theirs more, but a lot of states will do some summit meetings and meetings with state and local governments and state agencies to help provide information on what ESPC is and how it works. They provide a number of template documents that can make it really easy for a state agency to set up a contract with an ESCO. They also do generally pre-qualify the ESCOs to determine and make sure that the ESCOs have the ability and wherewithal to carry out an ESPC on behalf of the agency. They will provide review of various steps of the ESPC process. So they'll provide review of any investment grade audits that the ESCOs produce to help identify potential energy savings. In some cases, they'll help enter into negotiations and determine ESCO selection alongside the state agency and also help with the contracts. They will some energy offices do provide some oversight during the construction process, but then many of the agencies do provide especially a review of measurement and verification reports submitted by the ESCOs in accordance with state enabling statute. While the length of the M&V processes depends on the state, NASIO has always been a firm supporter of having M&V for the entire length of the contract instead of for just 2 or 3 years, just because you never know. Sometimes things happen later on in the contract with some of the equipment as it begins to age, and it's important to make sure that the agencies are aware of any discrepancies so that way they are receiving the savings that are guaranteed to them as part of the contract. If we can go to the next slide. So if you're a state energy office that is looking to either expand or develop a statewide ESPC program to help out with state agencies, NASIO is here to provide, the support you need and assistance as well, technical assistance to help you make sure that your program is robust and capable. And that's going to involve we do some direct technical assistance. We do a number of peer-to-peer sharing exercises. We're also happy to connect you with your peers. We've been around since the 1980s. We're the National Nonprofit Association for all the energy directors and territories. So we've been doing support and technical assistance for ESPC almost as long as the energy offices have been around. So we're always happy to provide more support for making sure that the energy offices are well equipped to administer an ESPC program on their end. In the past, we've done a number of different exercises to help provide technical assistance. We've engaged states one-on-one to provide ESPC technical assistance and foundations of ESPC trainings alongside our partners here at ESC. We've put out a number of resources focused on ESPC, on financing. We have a whole working group on grid interactive efficient buildings, the GEB working group that kind of looks at building interactions with demand response in the grid that can tie back into ESPC. And we also just make sure we do roundtables every once in a while to make sure we're getting states together to talk about current best practices for ESPC. If we go to the next slide, this just shows a couple of the recent resources we've put out. We've have a number of recent documents focusing on K-12 public school facilities. We've put out a few years ago a primer on MUSH market building financing options that gets into not only ESPC but a number of similar financial models that look like ESPC, don't operate quite the same way, but have been in use by especially local governments in the MUSH market, which includes energy as a service, concession agreements, and related models. One thing I want to plug here while I have your attention is we are in the process of putting together a program in a box for ESPC for K to 12 schools. So a NASIO program in a box is basically a standardized template, a standardized document that provides information where a state looking to establish or revise an existing policy or program can review best practices gained from other states that currently have active and successful programs in this area. So the program in a box we're putting out will have feature case studies from Arkansas, New Mexico, who's on here with me as well, and then Virginia as examples of how these states have utilized their existing ESPC programs to provide information and support for school systems as they look to do ESPC contracts. And so we divide each program in a box up into four different sections. We talk about some of the design aspects of it. What are the questions the state energy office needs to think about as they're designing the program? What are the decisions the energy office is going to have to make as it develops a program? And then what are the options the state energy office has when it's implementing the program? And then what is reporting going to look like, and what should you be thinking about reporting in the context of really specifically K to 12 schools, but you can also generalize this towards wider scale or wider scoped ESPC programs as well. And then in addition to that, one of the benefits of these program in a box is they also include the actual documents that these states use to help administer their programs. So that way, if you as a state are looking to revise your ESPC program, you'll have a document repository that you can go to and see how other states did it and move forward on it. So with that, I'd like to turn things over, I believe, to my friends and my colleagues in New Mexico to speak a little bit more on some of the case studies and best practices that they use in order to provide technical assistance for their ESPC program.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you for all the relevant and valuable information. So I'm going to get started here with the state energy offices. This is where the focus of this is going to be and the best practices for ESPC. So to start out, the first thing you have to know when you're implementing these ESPC projects is you got to know your laws, like not only your cans and your cannots, but what can this knowledge do for you? So like our law here in New Mexico, 623-1 through 623-10, we had an example where a charter school was unable to they thought they were unable to pursue an ESCO project, but instead they could pursue a PPA route. So if you know the points in your law, you can use that to your advantage. You can also use it as a selling point, right? If someone is afraid to get involved with an ESPC program, you can show them that there's guaranteed savings, or there's a cash bond that's written into our law 623-4. Right. So if you know your laws, you can use those to your advantage. And the same thing goes for contracts as well. If you have a contract with ESCOs, or we have a statewide price agreement they're on, you can use that to your advantage throughout the process to see what things you can add or subtract from the savings as well. The next thing I want to touch on is maintaining a relationship with your ESCOs. So we have 8 ESCOs here in New Mexico, and we have monthly meetings with all of them, check-ins to see how they're doing, what they're up to, where the project status is. And this relationship really builds and kind of builds a foundation for all these ESCOs to go and pursue work without, fear of government interjection, for lack of a better word. But these monthly meetings, we can also give them updates on our legislative session, which is about the end. They can get information from us as well as receiving information from them. When they're out here working on a project, go meet them, boots on the ground, go talk to them, go see what they're doing, what they're up to, how they've been. If you build that relationship, it can only help your ESCO program. And then invite them to community events where you can talk and share about these ideas. So TEMA is one we have here. It's the Texas Energy Managers Association. Of course, we have ESC. If you get them involved in coming out to these events, then you can share ideas and see what problems they're running into and see how you kind of work together to overcome them. The next thing I want to touch on is getting involved in the community. So here in New Mexico, we have the Board of Higher Education, the Capital Outlay Committee. Harold and I are both active members in that community. And we've had projects come before the board before and be denied because they weren't pursuing an ESCO. So they went back and pursued an ESCO, and getting the capital outlay committee on board, they push all these universities who come with their projects to pursue an ESPC if applicable. Same thing goes with the public schools. They have a capital outlay committee, and then your general services department. They own most of the buildings in the state, so getting them involved and getting them active and having them know the process really benefits your program. And the one thing I think that really sets apart New Mexico from the other states is our third-party reviewer. This takes the responsibility of the owner's rep, and it kind of puts an expert in their shoes, and it frees up the state energy office staff to oversee the program more than be hands-on in the program. So if it's structured right, it'll pay for itself. And that leads into the 1% fee of the program. So this is something we charge with our certification for every project that goes through an ESCO. It's collected from the ESCO, and it funds our program, it funds me, it funds anyone touching an ESCO, and it funds our third-party reviewers. So it builds a good base to sustain this third-party reviewer program and the ESCO program here within the state. Next slide. So here, I'm going to jump back to a slide that Chris had. This is showing the relationship between the ESCO owner and the owner's rep. And then I want to go to the next slide and show you what happens if you implement the third party. So you delegate the owner's rep to the third party, and that allows them to focus and support the owner rather than you. Us at state energy offices, we've got grants to worry about, reporting to the DOE to worry about. There's a lot of things there. And then you can have the third party reviewer review the audits, do the commissioning, M&V, and review construction as well. And it kind of frees up a lot of your time. They can give you an in-depth technical review that you can discuss. You can go back and forth with the ESCO with, and really get a foolproof investment grade audit. And since they're experts in their field, generally we've seen less things slip through the cracks. And I think we implemented them in 2012. And since then we have had little to no ESCOs not meet their guaranteed savings and not be overpriced for a customer. They really are on the customer's side. So once they give us their in-depth technical review, we can use that to certify the investment grade audit. In that certification, we include that 1% fee that must be paid. And that 1% fee they pay to us when the project begins construction. And that 1% fee is able to pay for us, pay for the technical review, and kind of keep this program running and sustain itself. So on the bottom right, you can see that it frees up our staff. The fee pays for the program. It allows for expert verification. And then it gives financier confidence as well. We see with the New Mexico board that finances a lot of these projects, they have a lot more faith in it because they know they're getting an in-depth review of these audits and that they're much more rigid, right? And then lastly, it builds trust with the owner and the public. So when you have these third-party reviewers, it tends to make better projects, right? And then you also don't have a for-profit company or a government agency coming down and telling you how to run these things. You have someone who's there, this third party is there for their best interest and to really give them a high quality project over anything else. Next slide. So I want to look at a few case studies here of some that we've done in New Mexico. This is the University of New Mexico South Campus. You can see that it was one of our better projects as far as savings, but I want you to take a look at all the things that were included at the bottom there of those bullets. You see the utility rate change. That's where I was talking about in the laws. If you know the laws, you can take advantage of these things. And that one we weren't sure about, but looking back through our contracts and looking through the laws, we determined that these guys were being overcharged for water usage, and we were able to change that and use that in the savings. This again was a project that went before the Board of Higher Education, and because we were involved in it, originally it wasn't supposed to be an ESCO project, but the Board of Higher Education pushed back and made sure that they pursued an ESCO route, which is actually beneficial to them, as you can see with the savings. Next slide. So this is Bernalillo County. Bernalillo County, if you don't know, that's where Albuquerque is located, our biggest city here. What I really want to highlight with this one is that you can see that the savings isn't a whole ton more than the cost, but that doesn't mean it's a bad project. So this county courthouse had a lot of things wrong with it, and they had massive savings, but they also had 9 other buildings that had problems with it, but didn't see exactly the guaranteed savings. So they were able to pair those other 9 buildings with this building to make a comprehensive portfolio for all these projects to guarantee a savings across all of them instead of just one individually. So when you see the savings, That's not everything in an ESCO project. So you can see projects that, barely make the guaranteed savings, but they take care of a lot of the buildings and they address a lot of that deferred maintenance. Next slide. And the last one here in New Mexico is the Santa Fe Community College. This is a microgrid project. This is a very new project that we haven't seen and this is a great example because you can get innovative with these projects and really see how these projects, develop past the point of the standard project. So with this microgrid, it's at the Santa Fe Community College, and because it's a learning curriculum, this teaches them about microgrids, how to work on them, and this is a great pilot project for other microgrid projects in New Mexico. So currently, things that are a little bit more vital, the Emergency Operations Center here in New Mexico, they've decided to pursue a microgrid project because of this. So good ESCO projects can inspire other ESCO projects. Next slide. So we're going to take a look at Colorado. This is a good example of what Chris was talking about earlier. The big targets in the ESCO sector is hospitals, corrections facility. You can see that this hospital yielded $46 million in savings on a $29 million cost. There are some big fish out there that you can really pursue with an ESCO. And this is a great example of one where they have lots of HVAC. They have, like Chris was saying, the pressure differentials need to be maintained, and they're on 24/7. So they have lots of maintenance and utilities that deteriorate faster. So these are great targets for future ESCOs. Next slide. And then I believe Chris wanted to take over for this one. This is one of his project babies. So,
All
Chris.
Right. Thanks, Colin. Great job. So this is an interesting project. I used to do a ton of work in North Carolina, and there's been a lot of projects done there, but the market had slowed down a bit, and they were looking for other ways to do things. And so the ESCO in this case worked with the local electric co-op or cooperative company, and they were able to work a deal so that they built a 500 kW solar array that was owned by the utility. It was included as part of the performance contract, right? So it's really unique way of doing this. All the other HVAC, lighting, building envelope was done, water management systems. It complied with some of the executive orders there to reduce energy use and include EV charging, and a lot of workforce development, right? Which was great. And they used a 70% hub usage. So it's a unique way to run a performance contract. And we don't have time to get into the details, but you can click on that link when you get the slides and look at this in some more detail. Next slide. So Hawaii, a state that has done a lot of performance contracting over the years. Recently, they had tried to get a few others started, but their program had expired. So they enlisted our help here at ESPC campaign to try to help them get another program running. And we're trying to create something at a few school systems on two of the islands that can then be scalable and replicable to the rest of the islands, right? And hopefully this will be something that can be used in other states eventually too. Some of the things we're talking about is picking a partner, not a project, right? Not having them put out an RFP and have ESCOs put together, full detailed audits as part of the proposal submission. That's a big waste of everyone's time and energy. And help create open book pricing, true transparent open book pricing. We're going to utilize some of the Department of Energy's tools that have been used for years at the federal level, the risk responsibility performance matrix, which helps everybody in the deal understand where all the risks are, how they get allocated, and who's responsible for them over time. A comment response resolution document, something that Colin was mentioning before. This really helps folks follow any questions that are asked and how they're answered throughout the just development and performance period, which really helps a project when it's a year or two down the road and people aren't sure, did we look at this already, or why didn't we put solar in every building, and all these kinds of things. So there's a lot of things. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but it's an example of this technical assistance the campaign is providing to states. And we'll talk about that some more in a minute. Next slide. Okay, so resources and upcoming events. Oh, there we go. So technical assistance. We do a lot of these trainings and webinars through the campaign. but we also provide direct technical assistance. And we've done this for 3 or 4 states already. We're working with 3 or 4 currently, and as well as cities, towns, and school districts directly. So if you have a project you're either thinking of starting, you have one going, and you have some questions about it, or you did one, and you're getting these like annual measurement verification reports from your ESCO, and they're not sure really what to do with them, or your boss is wondering why you're paying $1 million a year to some bank for some performance contract and know nothing about it, we can help you sort out all of these issues. So please just reach out. You can send an email to this ESPC campaign at hq.doe.gov. You can email me directly as well, and you'll see my information is there at the end. Next slide. So upcoming events. So Energy Services Coalition, right? Jamie Garrett, who's the magic behind the cursor here and doing all the slides, and myself are with Energy Services Coalition, and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, sort of our sister contractor to DOE for this ESPC campaign. They're running some webinars coming up here in the next few weeks. Using eProject Express is a fabulous tool. It's a free tool for you to be able to track all of your project documents and sort it and report it and all kinds of great things. That's going on the 18th of this month and 18th of next month. USGBC is having a Green Schools Conference this week in San Diego. And then we're having our next webinar on March 10th, how ESPC can drive innovation and economic development in your community. And we're just developing one now. We expect to be around April 14th. The Energy Water Nexus and ESPC. And it's particularly timely if any of you are paying attention out here in the West. The second of many deadlines just got passed with no resolution to how to handle the Colorado water program between 7 states out here. So now the federal government's going to take over making the rules. So it should be interesting. And if you're in the eastern half of the country, you're getting entirely too much water the past few years, and people are trying to figure out what to do with it. So next slide. So we've done 18 of these, I think, so far. Here's a few that are particularly relevant. If you're just thinking about starting a performance contract, check out some of these trainings and workshops. We also have a resource tour that a lot of the things that we just hit on very quickly here, you can go through in detail. And then we did a previous State of States webinar back in, I think it was September. Next slide. Then the campaign, right? I talked about this a little bit earlier. We're getting a lot done through the ESPC campaign, being able to really share and leverage a lot of resources like this today. We're trying to help folks like you that are on this webinar amplify and implement best practice approaches for your projects and programs, and really just show that this is a real valuable tool. You know, really demonstrate the impact, showing real measured and verified savings, and trying to showcase achievements like some of the case studies that Colin described and I described today. There's many, many of these out there, hundreds of them. So we'd really like for you to join. Please either click on the case submission form here, link to submit case studies. We're always looking for more. And to join the campaign, please click on the expression of interest form below. Next slide. All right. So that is it for our presentation today. We'd love to have some questions and provide you with some answers. We've got, let's see, what, about 15 minutes left? Okay. No questions. Well, this was drinking from a fire hose, and I appreciate it. But if you're not sure and you want to ask questions, you don't really want to do it in a public scenario like this, please email me afterwards. We can go back to talk about a few of these other projects if you like. I would like, Harold, you're on, and I know you've got a ton of experience working at State of New Mexico in this. And just before this, you were explaining some of the things that you've seen done that have really made a difference in the program there. If there's anything like that you'd like to share with the others on the webinar here.
Thank you. There are certainly things that have really helped the program. And one of the main things was a third-party reviewer process. They act as coaches, for our program. And in fact, this was really requested by the legislature many years ago because they did not see a lot of agencies participating. And so we had to get all these agencies together and find out why they weren't using this guaranteed energy savings law that they had passed. And we found out that the process was complicated. So that's when we decided that we needed a coach, or what we call a third-party reviewer, which actually helps the entities get through the process. And since then, we have like over $350 million worth of projects we've implemented in the state. One other thing I'd like to point out too is some agencies that have the money to do a project are actually use an ESCO to do their project, and then of course include energy savings in it, right? But in that case, they're not worried about having to pay back the project, right? Because they have the funding. Because it's really a dangerous environment out there now to go out to bid, do a design, and then bid a project. You never know what the bid is going to come back, right? Are you going to have enough funding? Whereas an ESCO can actually give you the exact cost of the project and implement the project in a really fast way, because it's a turnkey process. So that's been real helpful for some agencies. Another thing too I'd like to point out is schools. Schools have usually have to issue a bond to do a project of this kind, especially in this state, because usually the agency that oversees schools construction, they provide maybe about 50% of the cost if you're lucky enough to get through that application process. But the other 50%, then the local property owners have to, pitch in to complete the project. Well, an ESCO can help, relieve that cost. And in fact, the school may avoid having to go out to the taxpayers to get a project approved, right? Because the burden ends up on property owners, right, having to pay, an increased amount of taxes. So an ESCO could reduce that risk or reduce the amount of funding that the school will need. And that's one thing that I think people should realize, right, that for schools or any agency, it has to go out for funding to get, construction done. Then this is a process that reduces that need, or in fact eliminates it in some cases. So to me, that's a positive thing, that certainly a school or an entity, should use, right? Leverage all the different programs you can. We encourage leveraging, utility rebates, the federal rebates, all of those programs, into your project, and you make it more affordable. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Harold. Hey, Jimmy, can we go back to the North Carolina project of the Department of Adult Corrections? Okay, so one of the things that helped this program along is North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, NCDEQ, and specifically the Utility Savings Initiative, or USI. They, like EMNRD in New Mexico, basically are the state energy office, and they administer the ESPC program in North Carolina. And they spent a lot of time. They started doing this in 2006, 7, and have really developed one of the best programs in the country. They spent a lot of time. I think Hayward Fain is on here. He was working on this project, rather. And they spent a lot of time going back and forth between the Department of Corrections, Adult Corrections, and the ESCO, trying to help facilitate some pretty, I'd say, unique and inventive solutions to make a project successful, right? And that's what it really takes for the state agencies that do this, right? Like I mentioned, they're really bound by a lot of the ways they typically operate, right? And work with your state energy office, who can be a bit more flexible, right? And either have the in-house expertise or can go to the the outside expertise, like both Colin and Harold were saying, to help brainstorm things that are maybe a little outside of the box, if you will, but help create solutions that work for everybody, right? And that is especially needed today with the volatility that's in the construction market, as Harold said, right? You have bids coming in at 10 and 15% above the budget, right? And it makes it very difficult to put projects in place that are then going to perform, which is what almost always happens with design but build projects, and you get to supersede that, right, with performance contracting. So the way NCDEQ worked with them, and it took, I think, 2 years to get through this, right? It wasn't easy to do, right? Because you're basically doing things that are sort of outside of the normal procurement processes that get done in a state. But by working closely together and making sure you're interviewing and securing support from all the stakeholders. Like I like to say when I used to do this full time, from the very beginning of the project, you identify who has veto power over these projects, right? If you get them involved at the beginning of the project, have them, if not participating, at least informed throughout the process, right? And that's what, NCDEQ does, EMNRD in New Mexico. Energize Delaware does a really good job of this in Delaware, as well as many other states. It really makes a difference because when you get through that, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year of the investment grade audit completed, get the financial RFP out, get your financier selected, then all of the authorities having jurisdiction, right, getting to provide their votes on this project, they'll have to come together at more or less the same time to be successful. So it takes a lot of interaction with everyone that's both an internal and external stakeholder, right? And if you want, you can go back to our Energy Services Coalition events page under past events. We had a whole workshop where we had people from multiple states talking about just managing your internal and external stakeholder. That's a bit of a black art, right, that gets developed over time. But it really makes a difference. And that's one thing that was done here by DEQ working with the ESCO. I can't remember which one it was in this case, and the electric utilities, right? And then there was the wholesale electric utility and then the local electric utility. So they all had to really work together, right? Probably 5 different agencies or entities working together to make this successful. So anyway, just wanted to get that information out there. And if you have any more questions about any of these case studies, just any questions in general, like I said, just please reach out. We can provide you with additional answers to questions or this technical assistance I mentioned. Feel free to just email us and we'll set up a time, get on the phone or Zoom, Teams call, whatever, for an hour. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists. Did a great job, and Jamie Garrett there in the background behind the screen running all of this and has been a huge help. And all of you for attending, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.